Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Marlow and I am a self-published author. So this video is a collaboration with Kiley Keeling, who is also an author-tuber and writer. She was looking for someone to collaborate with on a YouTube video, and I said, hey, why not me? Let's see what we can talk about together. And we decided to talk about editing. So originally this started as just us talking about our editing process, maybe giving some tips, and it became a tag. So this is the first tag that I have done with someone. Actually, this is the first tag that I've helped create, I guess I should say. I'm going to leave the questions below in the description so anyone else can do this tag as well. And I'll also link Kiley's channel down in the description so you guys can check out her stuff and see her video. There's quite a few questions, so I'm just going to get started. And number 1, when do you consider a manuscript ready for the editing process? In general, I consider a manuscript ready for editing pretty much when there's nothing else I can do to the draft to make it any better. So when it comes to my writing, of course, I start with like a drafting phase, and this can go on for months or years, basically until I feel like the manuscript is as complete as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect or polished or pretty or any of those things. It's probably going to not be very good. But at that point, once I've decided that there's nothing else that I can do on my own, I will generally go into the beta reader process. Of course, I'll write the first draft and read over a couple times, edit whatever I can on my own. But basically, it's whenever I feel like the draft is a somewhat coherent, finished story. Question 2, how do you organize your editing process? So like I was saying, once I finish the manuscript in the sense that it is a mostly logical storyline, again, not saying that it's going to be perfect, I will of course begin with some big edits that I can do on my own. Now, I don't really do a chart or calendar or any really coherent thing. I do it mostly in my head. It just kind of when I feel ready for the next process. So once the draft is finished, I will do some self-editing, and that means changing the stuff that I know I want to change, whether that's characters, plot, maybe some spelling mistakes. But generally, you don't want to do too many line-type edits when the draft is still fresh, because there's a good chance that you will take out stuff or add more things. And yeah, so in that self-editing phase, I will often take things out. Maybe I'll add big scenes, whatever. It's just kind of what I know for a fact, I don't know. It's whatever I feel like needs to be changed that I can do on my own. And after that, I will generally send it off to beta readers, and then I will go through the whole beta reading process, which I'll link my beta reading video somewhere, probably up in the cards, and so you guys can see a little bit more in depth of what I do for that, but I'm not going to talk about that now. Once my beta readers are done, I will go through more edits on my own and usually take whatever suggestions they gave me and keep or toss whatever I want, and any of the suggestions that I keep, I'll go through and make those changes that I feel like should be changed. And then after I do all of that, especially if I end up adding big plot points, taking things away, fleshing stuff out, of course I'll go through another round of self-edits. For my debut novel, Blood of Fire, this was about the point where I sent it off to a professional developmental editor. So that would be someone whose job it is to give much larger suggestions about overall changes that you should do. I don't believe I'll be doing that for Trail of Flames this time around, but yeah, after I've done everything that I feel like I can do, after I feel like it's as good as it could possibly be, then I will go into line edits. And this time around, because I didn't hire a proofreader or anything like that for Trail of Flames, and I do regret that, I will be hiring someone to do that for me this time around. So I guess that's sort of a very quick overall look of my editing process. In general, I start with the really big picture stuff and then move smaller. What am I saying? And then move down into smaller edits until you get down to the really nitty-gritty stuff like grammar, punctuation, spelling, blah, blah, blah. Question number 3. Do you edit while you write the first draft? Generally speaking, most writers agree that you shouldn't edit as you write the first draft, but I really think it all depends. Like I was saying before, you don't want to make really nitty-gritty line edits in a really rough first draft, because there's a good chance that that scene that you're getting really into and trying to fix every little punctuation mistake might not exist later on. And especially if you are in the first drafting phase, as in just trying to get the story out there, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time fixating on the first part of the book when you're barely into the second part or you're trying to finish the ending. So it really depends. I won't do really in-depth line edits, but if I am going along and I'm in the middle of the book and I realize that I need this thing to happen but that kind of contradicts something that happens in the beginning. If I know exactly where that thing is and it's just a really quick fix, then I will go back towards the beginning of the book and fix that thing. But in most cases, I try to just like leave a note somewhere in the document. I tend to highlight the section or the paragraph that's applicable, and then I will leave a comment in the margin. I'm talking about in Microsoft Word. Again, I was going to try and say WordPerfect. I don't think that exists anymore. But I'll leave a note for myself basically in the margin. I'll know that something that happens in the later part of the book doesn't match up with something that happens in the front. And I'll be like, hey, you need to fix this. Otherwise that's going to be a plot hole and problems. Short answer, it all depends. There's some things I'll edit as I do the first draft, other things that I won't. Question number 4. Do you enlist CPs or critique partners while you are editing, before or after? I don't really have critique partners. If you don't know what a critique partner is, that's usually someone who you will pair up with, obviously like a fellow writer, and you'll switch manuscripts and just really focus in depth on each other's work and just go back and forth. It's a little different from having a bunch of beta readers, but I really don't use critique partners. It's not that I'm against it. I think it can be really useful to have, one-on-one sort of talks about your writing and what each of you need to fix and blah, 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 and just really get into the whole conversation about writing and what makes a story good or bad. But I just don't really use them. I pretty much only use beta readers. Number 5. At what point do you send your manuscript to beta readers? I think I did touch upon this a little while ago. I've been talking so fast I don't know what's happening anymore. Generally speaking, I'll send my manuscript to beta readers once I'm absolutely sure there's nothing else I can do on my own. And of course, I don't mean like the really small line edits, the really nitty-gritty details, but I just mean like I've fixed as many plot points and character issues and whatever that I feel like I can do on my own. But I will still have questions, and oftentimes those are questions that I'll send along to the betas, or I'll feel like, I'm probably going to change this thing later, or I'm going to flesh out that scene, or maybe I'll just completely remove that chapter and write something else instead. But I won't necessarily do it because I want to see people's feedback. There's a lot of instances I've had where I thought something needed to be changed, or something was working really well, but the betas didn't think so, or they thought, hey, that doesn't need to be changed. So for me, beta readers happen when I have just gone over my manuscript as many times as possible. It's not completely finished, it's probably going to change quite a bit, but I just need some extra help, and I want some other eyes and other opinions on my work. Question 6. How many rounds of edits do you usually do before a book is finished? As many as it takes. That's the short answer. I've heard a lot of people will say, I'm in draft number 5 of my book or whatever, and I'm like, I don't really know what you consider a draft. In my mind, I guess the 5th draft would maybe be like the 5th time I've gone through the manuscript, but I don't count those kinds of things. I don't keep track of how many edits or rounds of edits or anything that I'm doing. To me, it's just when the thing is done, then I will move on to something else. I do it very instinctually, I guess. And I was talking to someone else about this where I think on Twitter they posted something, or maybe we were just messaging back and forth, and he was like, what do people mean when they say that they're in their 6th round of edits? And I was like, I don't really know, because I don't bother counting them, because I don't care how many rounds of edits it takes. It just takes as many or as few as I feel like is necessary. Question 7. How long does your editing process normally take? Too long. Cries uncontrollably. It really depends. Again, there's some people who can just pump out multiple books per year, and to me that's kind of crazy. I mean, it really just depends on their situation. Maybe they are a full-time writer and that's exactly what their job is, and that's what they spend most of their day focusing on. But as someone who has a full-time job outside of writing, it takes me a lot longer to finish a manuscript, to edit the manuscript, to send it to betas and have them send it back, and this and that. Basically, the editing process could take months. It doesn't usually take years in my case that I can think of. God, I hope not. Blood of Fire, I know, took about 3 years total to finish. That was from the first draft to me actually publishing it. How much of that I spent editing, I'm not really sure, but I would probably say several months. I think it takes most of my time out of the entire process to just come up with the first draft, and then I spend a lot of time with editing, so that's why I say it could take months, partly because I have lots of other things that I'm doing outside of writing, but also because I try to be very thorough with the editing process. So drafting can be a little bit more just wild and reckless and just get it out there, just get it done. So it might not take as long to get the whole draft out. Like the first draft, bare bones, the thing is done, but it's not pretty. But I think editing should take much longer because, of course, there's much more steps involved usually, and you really want your work to be thorough before you send it off to publication or, query or get it self-published, whatever route you decide to take. But yeah, I think months is usually how long it takes. Again, I don't count. I probably should at some point because a lot of people ask me these questions, like, how long did it take to do this? I'm just like, fuck all if I know. I don't know. Number 8. What types of professional editing do you consider necessary? And this again is going to vary a lot depending on who you ask. There are so many different types of editing available. I don't even know off the top of my head everything there is. And of course, I've noticed that some new things are kind of coming into play. For instance, what's it called? Sensitivity readers and sensitivity editors. I don't know if that's the exact term, but that's definitely a much more new thing. As in people who are reading and critiquing and editing or fixing your book based on who it might offend. That's just the short way of saying it, I guess. But as for which things I personally think are necessary, I mean, beta readers I think are necessary, but they're not considered professional. They're usually just other writers, other people you know, maybe people in your life that could give insight into your writing. If you don't have beta readers that you feel like are really good at critiquing writing, then I would say developmental editing would be necessary. And I did do that, like I said, with Blood of Fire. I found someone through Readsy and actually paid them to go over the manuscript in full and do a very thorough analysis, including, page by page in the Word document. They made lots of suggestions on every single page, just about. And then they did I believe it was like a 3-page write-up, like final summary of all their thoughts and things they thought should be changed. And it was really helpful, but it was also pretty expensive. And that might not be something that people can afford, especially if you're self-publishing and don't necessarily have a huge budget to devote to all kinds of different editing. I think I would say having a proofreader, I'm just making up my mind as I go along, having a proofreader is definitely necessary because you want someone who actually knows the rules of grammar and can find things and just has a really fine eye for detail. So I would definitely hire someone to do proofreading, and that's what I'm going to invest my money in this time around when I end up publishing Trail of Flames, because just all the dumb little mistakes in Blood of Fire just really ticked me off. And so it would have helped to have someone whose job it was to go over that manuscript, Jesus, it's my child, to go over my manuscript with a fine-tooth comb and really dig into there and try to find every possible mistake. And with that said, even if you do hire someone who does that professionally, they're not necessarily going to catch every single mistake. Like I said, Blood of Fire went through so many different people's hands and so many eyes, and every single one of them, just about, noticed some sort of mistake. A lot of them noticed like the same mistakes, obviously. But even then, with, who knows, maybe like 10 different people looking at it and pointing things out, stuff still made it into the published book. So I would definitely invest in a professional proofreader, and even then, go over it again and just really focus on all the proofreading. You can tell I'm kind of salty about having mistakes in my published book. 8 minutes to get through all these questions. I don't know if we're gonna make it. That was a weird voice. Okay, this is the perfect segue, I guess. Number 9. What's the biggest editing mistake you've made? Not proofreading. It's not that I didn't proofread, it's that I didn't have anyone focus exclusively on proofreading. Anyone who did find spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes or just stupid little, you forgot the quotation mark here, you left an extra space here. They were also looking for like plot issues and character issues and stuff like that. So I think my mistake was not having someone exclusively look for grammar. And I'm still annoyed about that. I need to give myself a break. Number 10, when do you know the editing process is finished? Like I've said in the previous questions, it's kind of, to me, finished when there's absolutely nothing else I think needs or should be changed. And that goes for the high-level plot stuff, scenes, character arcs, character personalities, proofreading, copy editing, sensitivity readers, whatever else. It's when you feel like it is as good as it can possibly be. And I know there are people, not just me, people who have published books who feel like they still wish they could change things. Like famous authors and their very famous books, they still think, if only I had tweaked that little thing, if only I had done this instead. I feel like in the back of your mind, there's always going to be this feeling of like, maybe it's not quite done, maybe it's never quite done, because a lot of us tend to be perfectionists, and so we feel like if it's not absolutely perfect, then it's not done. But here's the thing, perfect doesn't exist, and that's perfectly fine. Books and movies and all kinds of mediums, what am I trying to say? They don't have to be perfect to be enjoyable, or to be good, or to be entertaining, or to be loved. I feel like the editing process is finished when I have done everything that I think needs to be done, and that it's good, it's professional, and it's something that I would feel proud sending out into the world. And number 11, the final question. Do you enjoy the editing process? My first instinct was to say no, and I guess, I don't love it. No, I really don't love it at all. It's not that I hate it, it's not like the worst thing in the world, but I feel like it's the most like trudging through mud. So I really like the first draft because it's sort of like free and frivolous, I guess, I don't know. With the first draft, your story can just go in all sorts of different directions, and it's much more sky's the limit, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to just write stuff down because you might get rid of it later, and it doesn't have to be so perfect and complete and final. But with editing, as they say, you're taking that big pile of sand and transforming it into a sandcastle. And that whole process can take a really long time and be very frustrating, and it feels like I have been editing Trail of Flames for freaking ever, and it is because I'm trying to be very professional and I'm trying to make something that's really good, especially because it is a sequel, so I'm like, there's all this pressure to continue the story in a really interesting way and to also sort of be better than the first book. That's just how it feels in my mind, so I don't really find editing enjoyable, but the thing I do enjoy about it is it feels like with each step of the editing process, the book is becoming a little more finished. Sandcastle is getting a little bit prettier, and it's finally getting more set in stone. So it feels more like I'm halfway through the tunnel, maybe I can see the light at the end, and we're gonna come out the other side, and hopefully it won't suck out there. So I don't really enjoy it, but I do feel like completing each stage of the editing process is rewarding and gratifying in its own way. So that was all of the questions, and I thought this was pretty interesting. Our original idea wasn't to just make a tag, but I'm kind of glad that we did make a tag and have all these questions, because I like answering questions like this. I like answering tags. I know I posted one last week, and I don't like to post so many in a row, but I also hoped that this video would be educational in some ways. So even though I'm not going to claim that my editing process is the one that you need to follow and that all of my tips will be great for everyone, I do hope that you took something away from this and that you can learn from my process. And like I said, I will link Kiley's channel down below in the description so that you can check out her video and give her a follow. And I'm really curious to see how she answers these questions and to see maybe we'll have the same opinions on certain aspects of the editing process, or maybe things will be completely different. And I'm also interested to know what you guys think of the editing process and how you go about it. As with most creative endeavors, there is no completely right or completely wrong way to do things. I do like seeing that people can create something that's really good even though we have a different process for doing so. I need to wrap this up because I probably have like 2 minutes left on my camera. If you'd like to keep up with me on my writing endeavors, I'll leave all my other social media links below in the description. And if you'd like to check out my debut self-published novel, Blood of Fire, I'll also leave that below in the description. So until next time, see ya!